6:35 today, Thursday, September 24th. And I would entertain a motion to take up item 1.
So moved.
Take up item 1.
All in favor?
Second.
All
Aye.
in favor? Aye. So item 1 was filed by Councilors Sullivan, Bartley, Greaney, and Vacon. Ordered that the City of Holyoke, through its Honorable City Council and Honorable Mayor, thereby petition the Massachusetts General Court, it should be, to enact legislation to establish a process for recalling elected officials in the City of Holyoke, and that said legislation be entitled An Act Providing for the Recall of Elected Officials in the City of Holyoke. Just to give us a brief history in honor of Councilor McGivern. In 2017, we may recall that following the approval of an additional 4-year term to the 2 that we already have in the City Council unanimously approved recall language in light of those existing longer terms. So the City Council unanimously approved it. It was sent to the mayor, who did not sign it, so it did not move forth. In 2018, the recall provision was filed again. It passed by a veto-proof majority of the council and was sent to the mayor, and he didn't sign it again, not providing reason that we're aware of. So then in 2019, it was not refiled, and now in 2020, in essence, the same language that has been passed twice by the council has been refiled. So I would just note that we're coming into the last year of 4-year terms. And so this petition would have essentially no impact on people currently serving their terms in the present time. The City Council, rather than moving the resolution on the floor, requested it to go to this committee so that the mayor could have opportunity, if he chose, to inform the committee and the council as to what his thinking was in not signing to move it forward to the general court. So in light of the request of the council, I asked our administrative assistant, Ryan, to invite Mayor Morse to the meeting tonight. And Ryan sent this communication to Mayor Morse. Councilor Vacon, the chair of the Charter and Rules Committee, has asked that I extend an invitation to you for a meeting on Thursday, 9/24, taking place on Zoom at 6:30 p.m. for discussion on the following order. And the order is the one that I just read into the record, so I will not repeat it. And Ryan further went on to say, if you could please just let me know if you're available to participate in this meeting, it would be much appreciated. And Mayor Morse did respond. He said by email, "Thanks, Ryan. I will not be in attendance. At this time, I will not be signing any charter changes into law. And as the council knows, no home rule petition moves forward without the approval and consent of the chief executive." So that is the feedback from our mayor on this matter tonight. So it's my intention to read into the record the legal form that was provided to us today by Crystal Barnes, our acting city solicitor. And I believe it is essentially word for word the same as the second resolution that we took up. So if the committee will indulge me, I will read it into the record. However, before I read it into the record, if there are any members of the committee or members of the council that are on the meeting that would wish to comment or make any statements relative to the motion, I'd be happy to hear those before I read this into the record.
Yes, Madam Chair.
Yes, Councilor Greaney.
Is there any other recourse if the City Council unanimously passes this resolution? Is there any other recourse that we might petition the state or some other venue to see if we could get this into the hands of the voters?
I am not certain. The question has been raised to me whether the citizens could petition to have the question placed on the ballot, but I would have to do further research to know if that is an option.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Bartley?
You may just want to refer that to legal.
Okay, I would entertain a motion by a committee member to refer that question as to whether citizens can petition for this question to be on the ballot to legal.
Second.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so thank you. This will be sent over to legal. I don't know if Crystal is on the call, but Ryan, you could be sure that she gets this, please.
She is on the call.
Sure, and she is on the call.
Okay, thank you. All right, not seeing any further, oh, Counselor McGivern.
Sorry, I have my blue hand up.
I'm sorry, I didn't look at the blue hand.
That's okay. I think it's a good idea to get some legal options, any legal options that are out there, so we know how it works. Unfortunately, my understanding that this is a charter change to get on the ballot, you need to do a full charter review commission type process similar to the last one that was done in the city. And then unfortunately, they look at the whole, if they look at the whole charter, it's very confusing. But I want to say what I said the last time we adopted this. I'm not a big fan of recall, because I think recall petitions, it can be used and can be misused. And however, I do understand that the voters, now we understand the voters wanted 4-year terms for certain positions, the mayor, the treasurer, and so forth. And I understand 4-year terms, especially for a position as important as the mayor and treasurer, is a long time, to go without recourse. So I think I see this as a necessary option. I would ask the committee, there's just one, maybe, if you would indulge me for a minute, one possible amendment that I would make to it, and that's the number of signatures from the voters is 250. I think that might be a little bit low. We might want to consider 500 or something in that neighborhood. 500 these days is nothing, and this isn't, if someone wants to do the work, but I think it's more fairer, look at the number of voters who want this to be considered. But that's it. The language stays the same with amendment if possible, but either way, I'd vote in favor of it because I see it as a necessary option and unfortunately to a situation where sometimes voters just need the option. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else waiting to be heard before I read this into the record?
Linda, just adds up, Jim Leahy just signed in, so he might just be getting in here. I don't know if he's going to want to comment, but I just want to let you know, it might take him a moment to just get on here and to hear us.
I'm here, Ryan. Thank you so much. No, go ahead, Linda. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And as I'm going through these sections, if anybody wants to jump in with anything, that's fine. And I'll try to take notes so the committee can consider any potential amendments when we get to the end, okay? Okay, so section 1, that any person who holds an elected city office whose term is 4 years with more than 12 months remaining of the term of office may be recalled from the office by the voters in the manner provided in this section. Recall petitions, 250 with a proposed amendment of making that 500 is asked for consideration, or more voters may file with the city clerk an affidavit containing the name of the officer whose recall is sought and a statement of the grounds upon which the petition is based, not less than 12 months prior to the expiration of the term of office. The names on the affidavit shall be from the city at large. The city clerk shall deliver to the said voters petition blanks demanding said recall, printed forms of which he shall keep available. The blanks may be completed by writing or typewriting. They shall be addressed to the city council. They shall contain the names of the persons who have filed the affidavit and the grounds for recall as stated in the affidavit, they shall demand the election of a successor to the office, and they shall be dated and signed by the city clerk. A copy of the petition shall be kept on file in the office of the city clerk in a record book maintained for that purpose. The recall petition shall be returned and filed in the office of the city clerk within 30 days following the date the petitions were issued, signed by at least 10% of the total number of persons registered to vote at the preceding city election. The city clerk shall, within 24 hours following such filing, submit said petitions to the registrar of voters, who shall forthwith certify thereon the number of signatures which are names of voters. B, recall election. If the petition shall be certified by the registrars of voters to be sufficient, the city clerk shall forthwith submit the same to the city council. Upon its receipt of the certified petition, the city council shall forthwith give written notice of said petition and certificate to the person whose recall is sought. If the officer does not resign his office within 10 days following delivery of the notice, the city council shall order an election to be held with the subsequently scheduled November election, excluding the November election held during the final year of the officer's term. C, nomination of candidates. An officer whose recall is sought may not be a candidate to succeed himself at the recall election. The nomination of candidates, the publication of the warrant for the recall election, and the conduct of the same shall be in accordance with the provisions of other laws relating to elections, unless otherwise provided in this section.
Madam
D.
Chair,
Councilor Greaney.
could I interrupt? If you go back about 4 or 5 sentences, that should probably, an amendment should probably be himself or herself.
Right, yes. I will note that where it says himself, we'll add / herself.
Thank you.
Thank you. Propositions on ballot. Ballots used at a recall election shall state the following propositions in the order indicated. For the recall of name of officer, against the recall of name of officer. Adjacent to each proposition, there shall be a place to vote for either of the said propositions. After the proposition shall appear the word candidates and the names of candidates arranged alphabetically by surname. If a majority of the votes cast upon the question of recall is in the affirmative, the candidate receiving the highest number of votes shall be declared elected. If a majority of the votes on the question is in the negative, the ballots for candidates need not be counted except as provided in C above. E, the office holder. The incumbent shall continue to perform the duties of his or her office until the recall election. If he or she is not recalled in the election, he or she shall continue in office for the remainder of the unexpired term, subject to recall as before, except as provided in this section. The office is recalled in the election, he shall be deemed removed until the qualification of his or her successor, who shall hold office during the unexpired term. If the successor fails to qualify within 5 days after receiving notification of the election, his or her, the incumbent shall thereupon be deemed removed and the office vacant. F, repeat of recall petition. No recall petition shall be filed against an officer within 6 months after he takes office, he or she. I think this goes to the question of just sour grapes, given an election result, perhaps. Or in the case of an officer subjected to a recall election and not recalled, thereby until after the completion of the current term. So it prevents somebody from being able to continually just file recall provisions. Section 2, so much of chapter 438 of the Acts of the year 1896 as appearing in chapter 189 of the Acts of the year 1992 and any acts in amendment thereof, and in addition thereunto, as are inconsistent with this act, are hereby repealed. Section 3, This act shall be submitted for acceptance to the qualified voters of the city of Holyoke by the city clerk, placing the following question on the official ballot to be used in the city of Holyoke at the regular municipal election to be held in the year, well, this says 2021 for purposes of this discussion. Shall the city of Holyoke implement a recall process for any elected official whose term exceeds 2 years with more than 12 months remaining of the term of office? And then it goes through and states what I just read relative to the majority of votes. An answer to said question is in the affirmative, then this act shall take effect forthwith. Section 4, the city solicitor shall prepare a fair, concise summary and purpose of the law to appear with the question no later than 35 days before the election in accordance with Section 55A of Chapter 54 of the general laws. Section 5, the general court may make clerical or editorial changes of form only to the bill unless the mayor and city council approve amendments before enactment by the general court. The mayor and city council are hereby authorized to approve amendments which shall be within the scope of the general public objective of this petition. Section 6, this act shall take effect upon its passage. So thank you for bearing with me. I'm just thinking there might be people watching that do not know what the language said and what sort of restrictions and limitations were also present in it. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear. So, so far I have the editorial his and hers where that's needed, and a suggestion from Councilor McGivern that we consider amending the 250 signature requirement to 500.
And also change the date to Linda as well.
Well, we are at September 24th, and our next city council meeting will be on October 1st.
No, I mean the year. You had put a placeholder in, I believe.
It was 2021, and I'm just thinking out loud as to whether if the mayor was to change his mind and sign off on it, if we had enough time within the language for this year. And I'm thinking it said 35 days, if I read correctly. So I think we're outside of that window. So it would have to be at a future date. But the 2021 was the placeholder date, assuming we could get it agreement in time. Are there any other comments or discussion that?
Yeah, Madam Chair.
Yes, Councilor Greaney?
I'd like to move that we honor Councilor McGivern's amendment to move to the 500.
Okay, do I hear a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion on the amendment? Hearing none, I'll ask for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The amendment carries 3-0 to change 250 to 500 signatures to initiate the recall.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just reviewing the language to check for that 35-day period. Yes, in section 4, the city solicitor would have to prepare the summary, which she has enclosed for us in the legal form, no later than 35 days before the election. So she has met that burden within this language from what I can see. So I would ask at this point if there are any other amendments. Councilor Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a few questions, since I wasn't involved in this first round a couple of years ago or in 2018. So right now, with the 4-year terms, we would have 2 school committee people that would be recallable, but all the city councilors and the other school committee members would not be. So I'm just wondering if we can make, if there's a rationale for not making a recall for all elected officials. And I know the time frame makes it a little more difficult for a 2-year term, since you would have to give them 6 months to be chosen. And then you would have to act at the very next election. So that's one issue that I would like to know. But if not, then I would say, if we aren't going to make it for all the city council and the school committee, I would make an amendment that we not include the 2 school committee people that are at large in 4-year terms. It just seems like they're doing the same job, but they're under a recall petition, whereas no one else in that school committee would be.
So I take your point. I would only note that the ward counselors and the ward representatives of the school committee are not elected at large, and recall provisions call for city-wide petitioning relative to a recall. So the logistics of that would seem challenging.
So just if I can ask a question on that then. So the 2 school committee at large would be recallable. Would city councilors at large be recallable? But because except that they're only a 2-year term, so they would not be according to this.
Right. This is only pertaining to people who are elected for a 4-year, a greater than 2-year term.
Yeah.
But I mean, it would seem, well, I won't speak for the committee. I would just make my comment that if we're looking at the length of a term, then we shouldn't be looking at which body the elected officials sit on if our concern is relative to the length of the term, rather than where the term exists, because the treasurer and the clerk are also not of a body per se. I think it would be inconsistent, but Councilor Greaney?
Yeah, just in response to Councilor Murphy's suggestion, the 2-year term would really limit the ceiling for recall, since you could not recall somebody 6 months after the election, or you could not institute a recall for the final year of a term. That would leave a 6-month period that you could institute a recall, and I think that would be virtually impossible to do.
Okay, no, I appreciate that.
Okay. Is there anybody that I'm not, Councilor McGivern?
Just along the same lines, when we first looked at this language, I think it was right before or right after the vote on making the mayoral position, for 4 years. The city council was also within that language too, but the voters chose only to make the mayor 4 years.
Correct.
So we thought we were making this language for a lot of people, and I kind of agree with Councilor Murphy that because the school committee's makeup terms are a little bit different, maybe it does make sense just to remove the at-large position themselves.
Councilor Bartley?
Yeah, I had to, let me take the hand down here. Yeah, I'll make my original point I'll make second. Let me just respond to that. Well, I was going to say what Councilor Greaney said, so that leaves a very narrow window. If you start carving out 4-year elected officials, does that not get us into targeting, a specific elected official? On this, I don't see the rationale, and I think any 4-year elected official would understand the gravity of their office. And I mean, for example, we have one at-large school committee person who's still on that board, who's literally skipped meetings for over 1 year straight, still collected her paycheck and still is on the city insurance. I mean, I think that's disgraceful conduct by an elected official. That should warrant consideration for recall. And that person still is she is still a large school committee person. So this affects one mayor, 2 at-large school committee persons, 1 clerk and 1 treasurer. It's a pretty narrow field, but I think if we carve out a position from one from another, I think it's subjecting the city to liability. I think it'd be foolish, and I would oppose it. The main reason for raising my hand, Madam Chair, is to point out, after you took the vote for the 500, I didn't want to interject then, but it just for your consideration, and I don't want to make the amendment, or I can't make the amendment until it goes on the floor, but if it's going to be 500, I mean, just to emphasize the gravity of this, I don't think it should be 482 from Ward 7 or Ward 3 or Ward 5. I think it should be, there should be some formula to make sure it's qualified voters from all 7 or how many wards we have at the time. We know we're going to have to, or somebody's going to have to redistrict for you know, after the census is back. So whenever that happens. So how many wards we have and all the rest of that. But right now it's 7. So I would hope that we'd have some kind of a minimum threshold, whether it's 25 or 50 or some divisible number in there. Just some food for thought. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody wishing to speak that I have not recognized? Okay, so to
Yeah, Councilor.
I'm sorry, that is not coming through on the audio. Councilor Leahy, are you wishing to address us? I'm sorry, I cannot hear you. Can members of the committee and council hear?
Madam Chair?
Councilor Greaney.
Yeah, I think Councilor Bartley's suggestion has a lot of merit. And I'm thinking, why wait for the full council to make an amendment? Why don't we amend it? We have a certain number from each particular ward that would be a minimum. Say it be 50 from each ward. That would be 350 of the 500 signatures, and the rest would be would fill in with the rest of the.
Councilor Bacon, can you hear me?
Councilor Leahy, excuse me, Councilor Greaney.
Yeah,
I will
can you
recognize.
hear me okay?
I just could not understand you. Okay, I'll be right with you. All right, Councilor Leahy? Councilor Greaney?
So that would tighten up the recommendation or the requirement if we had X amount, say, you know, like I had stated, the certain number, whatever the number would be feasible, and be able to fill in with the rest.
Okay.
And why not tighten up the language now so we don't have to do it in the full.
Sure.
Okay. Okay. And I'll entertain a motion, but I just want to make sure we can hear Councilor Leahy. Councilor Leahy?
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can now.
Okay. My only question, I don't have it in front of me, but I think that when we did this last time, it was 1,000. Somebody needed to gather 1,000 signatures for this process to happen. If that is true, and I think it is, why is it 100 from the last time we voted this unanimously?
So we took this up on 2 separate occasions. I don't know what exactly the first language was that was voted unanimously. This is the language that was provided to us from Crystal for tonight that I believe was from the second vote that we took on this matter. And in that language was the 250, which we just amended up to the 500.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Counselor, is there anyone else who wishes to speak on any amendments?
This once again, Councilor Greaney, would it be legitimate to go 50 signatures from each ward, or 30 signatures from each ward, or whatever is the logical number, because we want full city participation in this event. And I think Councilor Bartley's right. So I don't know what the right number would be. There are different populations in different wards. So, certainly we don't want to overburden any ward with too many signatures, whether it be 25, whether it be 30. I don't know what the accurate number would be. Like Councilor Bartley said, there are large numbers of people in Ward 7 and Ward 3. There are larger wards and smaller wards. So in order to balance it, I don't think that we should make the number too high, but I think that it should be a workable number for each ward.
Thank you. Well, certainly the number would be at the discretion of the committee and the council. And I support the notion that in such a serious thing, there would be representation from all the wards. I would note that all of the wards are generally the same size. However, where they are greatly different is in the people who turn out to vote. That is where we see very large discrepancies. So I think given that the turnout variance is very high, we should go for a consistent number, but I think it should be maybe more to a mid range than a very high or low range. But I'm open to any input from counselors here or other members of the committee. I'm hearing a range between 25 and 50. Is there feedback or opinion relative to what the number would be from anybody here? I can't see the hands, so I will ask you just to speak if you wish.
Councilor Bartley, Linda.
I just can't see the hands.
Councilor Bartley's raising his hand.
Oh, Councilor Bartley.
I like the 25 to 50 range, or I think that's wonderful. Just so long as there's some kind of minimum threshold from each of the 7 wards. I think whatever number the committee comes up with is going to be acceptable to me. I don't have an exact number, but now that we have 500 as proposed to the council, I would hope we could come up with, I don't know, whatever it is. 50 sounds right, but 25 is okay by me too. Whatever you think. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Greaney, would you like to make a motion and propose a number?
Yeah, well, I'll propose 25, and if the full committee wants to amend that when we get there, that's fine.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion to add language that would include a minimum of 25 signatures from each ward to move a recall petition forward. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Hearing the amendment passes 3-0. Are there any other amendments that anyone would like to offer?
Can I just ask one other question?
Councilor Murphy.
Yeah. So let's say somebody files this petition and it gets filed in November of the year after the person got elected. They cannot be, if I'm reading this correctly, it would be a year where the petition could be valid, but it would be a year before the citizens would get to vote. Am I correct on that?
So let me revisit that. So as the language reads, the resignation of the person being recalled is sought as a first step. If within 10 days they don't, it says that the city council shall order an election to be held with the subsequently scheduled November election, excluding the November election held during the final year of the officer's term. So that I would interpret that to be any November election, whether it was the municipal election or a statewide election.
So my point though is we could have a petition signed by the proper number of citizens, and that person would, the judgment, if you will, would still not be made potentially for another 12 months to the next. I mean, there's no provision in there for calling for a special election or anything like that, or is there other provisions?
I do not see a provision for that. So if, just thinking out loud relative to the language, so you're elected in November, you assume office in January, you can't be recalled until the earliest July. And so then there would be an election in November if it's in the first year. If it's in the second year, then there could potentially be a longer lag before you got to the next November.
Right.
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay. That, and is there any way that, is there any, is there any recalls throughout the state where you can call for a special election to do with the recall?
There's nothing, unless we prohibit it in our language, that, I mean, we can call a special election should the city council want to add in the language for a special election. I do not remember the detail of why it was put this way. I think it was probably put this way to avoid the cost of running a special election.
Yeah.
You know, and also thinking that the circumstances of this would be quite rare.
Yeah, I would agree, and hopefully they are rare, but I'm just thinking if in fact it was almost a 12-month process, that we would be in a, I would think, a somewhat non-functioning community at that point when we're waiting that long for the recall. And maybe people would just wait, I don't know, but that's my only concern there if it was taking that long, so.
Well, we could certainly amend this language, and within that language where it says the city council shall order an election to be held with the subsequently scheduled November election, excluding the one in the final year, or call a special election if deemed necessary by the council. I mean, we can add that language in if the committee wishes. Would you like the committee to consider that as an amendment?
Yeah, I would like the committee to consider. I just think, you know, if we end up and we've got a recall petition, that the sooner it's handled, that we get back to either replacing that person, recalling that person, or we get back to business as usual and there's no more recall petition available.
All right. Well, to members of the committee, if you are thinking that this would be a reasonable amendment to make, I'm open to considering a motion on an amendment.
Yeah, Madam Chair.
Councilor Greaney?
Yeah, I think that's legitimate. I think that's probably a good idea. I know, maybe have Crystal research it too to see if there have been any other special elections called by councilors around the state. There's a possibility that there is precedent somewhere around the state with something like this. But sure, I think that we should have language like that in there. I think it's a good idea. The sooner the better. If there's something that's gone awry in the city and the voters wish to exercise their power, then I think that we should make it available for them.
Okay, thank you. So is that a motion?
Yes.
Is there a second?
What was the overall motion again? Just so
So
we're
the
clear.
motion is that in the language where it talks about if the officer does not resign his office within 10 days following delivery of the notice, the city council shall order an election to be held with the subsequently scheduled November election, excluding the November election held during the final year of the officer's term, or call a special election as deemed necessary.
So you're adding the or portion.
Yes.
Okay, second. Just want to make sure it was on the record clearly.
Sure
Thank
thing.
you.
Okay, thank you.
Linda? Just under discussion?
Councilor Bartley.
Yeah, I just want to support the language. I think it's a pretty prudent idea by Councilor Murphy to do that. I just want to point out that I guess somebody drove by, the loud music. Sorry. I just want to point out that the only recall I know in the Commonwealth, I mean, there must have been others. The one that got a lot of traction is the one in New Bedford, and I don't. I mean, it was very quirky. I believe the gentleman was recalled, but I think he won a special election on the same ballot, so he got to continue to be mayor. I don't think I'm right on that, but I'm not off by much. So, but maybe that's an example of a that wasn't in November either. So
Okay.
maybe that's an example that the law department can review. The city of New Bedford. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. And I would note that our language does state that the person under recall cannot also be a candidate on the same ballot for the recall. Thank you. So we have a motion and a second relative to adding the language for the special election as deemed necessary. So all in favor on that amendment?
Aye.
Any opposed? The amendment passes 3-0. Are there any other questions, concerns, or recommended changes? Councilor Murphy.
Yeah, one last suggestion, and that is the candidates for the office should be chosen just like they are in a random selection and not be put in alphabetical order. I mean, there is been surveys that being first in the list or last in the list ends up getting you some additional benefits. So I don't think we should be doing that on the basis of you're an A person or a Z person.
And so the way that we do it now is by drawing out of a hat, right?
Right.
Yeah. Why is Tolman always first?
Uh-huh.
Why is Tolman always first on that? Somehow he's like the first guy on top of that large roster.
So, and what do we call that just as a legal term? When that the order be determined by what?
Random selection, I thought.
Okay. That the order be determined by random selection in place of alphabetically.
Correct.
What does the committee think of that? And is there a member who would like to see it go in the order that we conduct our regular elections?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay, so we would call for the regular order that they would be determined by random selection on the recall. Any other questions, concerns, or amendments? Councilor Bartley.
Yeah, somebody just sent me a text message. It wasn't New Bedford, it was Fall River. So I stand corrected. I knew I was wrong. I couldn't remember. I wasn't off by much, but it just.
Okay.
You're in the neighborhood, David.
All right.
Yeah, New Bedford, what could go wrong there? Nothing. It's like the home of Moby Dick and all that. It's amazing. Of course, that book was written, Councilor McGivern would know, that book was written while the author was housed in Pittsfield. How about that? He wrote Moby Dick and looking at some mountains and look at the Berkshire Mountains in Pittsfield. Just a quick comment, Madam Chair. It's my hope that, it was our hope at the last city council meeting when we referred this, but it's always, I don't like just doing stuff on the floor. And these are about 7 or 8 good examples why it's just great not doing it on the floor, because we never would have, this never would have come up. So it's always good just to refer to committee. That's just small point 1. Small point 2 is what we wanted to do was get some feedback from the mayor, and we did. And the mayor's answer was, I will not be in attendance. I will not be signing any charter changes into law. And as the council knows, no home rule petition moves forward without the approval and consent of the chief executive. So I appreciate the civics lesson, for one. But I don't appreciate the hubris again exhibited by, I'll use his own phrase, the chief executive. So it's my hope when one of us take, like, as you know, Councilor Bartley did at the last meeting, took a few knocks about an open meeting law violation. I look forward to my day and the hearing, but it's my hope that the crack reporters we have covering the city council will at least attempt to contact the mayor, and maybe the mayor, well, he won't answer to the elected officials. I mean, who are we? But perhaps the mayor will answer to the Fourth Estate, if they even bother to question the mayor. I mean, especially that fish wrap from Springfield. But if they even deem to question the mayor, I hope he will at least stoop down and give a rationale besides because. I hope he gives some kind of a rationale for this, because this is again exhibit 52 of the absence or just the weak need leadership we have in room one. Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Councilor Murphy, and then I'll recognize Councilor Greaney.
I just want to echo what Councilor Bartley just said. I mean, the mayor has a right to not sign this, but I do think it's important that he explain to the voters why he does not think this is a good idea, so that they can make a judgment as to his judgment. And I think right now he just basically said, I'm not doing it. That's not providing leadership. That's not providing a better understanding of the pros and cons. And I do hope that he will put some rationalization as to why, specifically why he thinks a recall petition, which many communities have, is not something that we should have.
Thank you. Councilor Greaney.
Yes, Madam Chair. I didn't think that I would ever say this in public, but it's amazing how much I feel now that we miss the publication of the Holyoke Transcript Telegram, who would always be reporting on issues such as this. That was a hometown newspaper that left no stones unturned, and we miss it tremendously, and I never thought I'd say that. But God bless the Holyoke Transcript Telegram, and may it rest in peace.
Amen.
Croaked by the Springfield newspaper, Howie. Croaked by David Starr and Larry McDermott.
Thank you. Is there any comment by anyone else that I have not recognized? Okay. For myself, I would just say that I see this as a good government action that the council is trying to take, and I hope that someday we'll be able to make it reality here in Holyoke. So let me review for the committee the amendments that have been approved, and then I will seek a motion to recommend to the city council adoption of the recall language as amended. So I have an amendment to change the initial petition of 250 to 500 with a minimum of 25 signatures from each ward. I then have an amendment that the city council could call a special election if deemed necessary, if the time was too great from November to November from the time of the recall. And also editorial changes that where it says him, it would say him or her, etc. And also that the order of any candidates on the recall ballot would be determined by random selection in place of the language stating alphabetical order. So those amendments have all been made and approved. And I would now entertain a motion to approve the recall language as amended.
So moved to approve as amended.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any nays? So the language as amended passes 3-0. We have requested our attorney to weigh in on some of the alternatives that might be available relative to achieving the recall, if she could, and any of the other questions that might inform the council, Attorney Barnes, that you might make available to us either before October 1st or at the meeting on October 1st, that could inform us on this matter would be greatly appreciated. Thank you. So that being our only agenda item, I will let the committee know. I looked through the jacket. Everything else in the jacket is really stale from about 2018. So at some point, I may just put the whole remainder of the jacket on an agenda just to clean it up. But for tonight, this was our only agenda item. So I would entertain a motion to adjourn at this time unless there's anyone else who wishes to speak.
Yes, Madam Chair, I
Councilor
would,
Green.
yeah, I would like to move that we recommend this committee's report to the full council.
Second. So I think we accomplished that with our motion on the amended language, but we can move it affirmatively again if you want. Do I hear a second on that?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Any other business anyone wants to bring forth relative to recall? Hearing none, seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you all very much for your attention and your input. I think we've made it better than it was.